My name is Elena Marys, 26 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago what would finally make me stop defending my family, I would have pictured something dramatic. A screaming match, a scandal, some huge public blow-up. I never would have guessed it would start with a question asked over dessert in a fancy restaurant, and the kind of silence that makes you feel like the floor just dropped out from under you. Looking back, I should have seen it coming long before that night. They almost ruined my wedding. That should have been enough. My parents argued with the venue manager the night before because they didn't like the table placements, even though Liam and I had spent hours making the seating chart ourselves. My mom cried because her name wasn't in the program more than once. My dad made a passive-aggressive toast at the rehearsal dinner that ended with a weird comment about how marriage is a job like any other, except you can't quit. And Rachel, my sister, wore white. Not a floral dress with some white in it, an actual white gown. When one of Liam's cousins asked her why, Rachel just laughed and said she didn't think it mattered, because the dress was expensive. I should have known right then what they were capable of, but I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt, mostly because the alternative was too painful, admitting that I'd been born into a family where selfishness wasn't an exception, it was the rule. So when Grandpa said he was flying in for my 26th birthday and wanted to take us all out to dinner, I had mixed feelings. He was the only person in the family I actually trusted. Sharp, quiet, and far more observant than people gave him credit for. He'd made his fortune in logistics, sold his company when I was in high school, and had been semi-retired ever since, bouncing between Arizona, Maine, and any random place with decent hiking trails. We met at this upscale Italian place downtown. Linen tablecloths, waiters in ties, the kind of restaurant where every plate is oversized and the food is microscopic. Liam and I got there early. He squeezed my hand before we walked in. "Let's just make him rude tonight," he murmured, half joking, half bracing. My parents arrived late, Rachel even later. Her excuse was traffic, though I'd seen on her Instagram story that she'd stopped for a bubble tea selfie on the way. Once everyone was seated, they started doing what they always do when Grandpa's around, putting on a show. My mom fawned over the wine list like she understood any of it. My dad cracked jokes about the good old days when he was head of the house. Rachel leaned forward, all faux intrigue, talking about how she had something huge in the works, but couldn't say anything yet. It was exhausting. I didn't expect anything from the night. I figured we'd fake our way through another family dinner, Grandpa would give a short toast, the bill would come, and we'd all go home pretending everything was fine. I did not expect him to say what he said. The waitress had just brought the dessert menus. Grandpa leaned forward, looked directly at me, and smiled in that gentle, almost conspiratorial way he has. "So," he said, "how's the company doing with the startup capital I sent you?" For a second, it was like someone had turned the volume down on the world. The clinking of cutlery, the murmur of other tables, the soft music. It all faded. I felt my face go hot. "What startup capital?" I asked. For the first time all night, no one in my family was performing. My dad's smile cracked, just slightly. My mom blinked twice, too fast. Rachel dropped her fork. The sound of it hitting the plate was louder than it should have been. Grandpa turned his head slowly toward them. The warmth slid right off his face. "Then who took it?" he asked. Silence, not just quiet, church quiet. My heart hammered in my chest. Months ago, I had told Grandpa about my idea, a small web-based logistics service focused on local vendors. I'd mentioned it in passing, almost as a joke, something between a thought experiment and a daydream. He'd seemed interested, asked a few questions. I assumed he was just being polite. I never asked him for money. In my family, asking meant owing, and owing meant never really being free. It turned out he'd sent $40,000 to help me get it off the ground. He hadn't said it loud. He hadn't stood up and pointed fingers. He just let the question hang in the air and watched. My dad stared at his water glass like he was trying to see the bottom of it. My mom glanced down at her purse as if the answer might be hidden in there. Rachel picked up her wine and took a sip, pretending nothing was happening. And that was when it clicked. They hadn't just borrowed it. They hadn't just misused it. They'd hidden it. They knew exactly what that money was for, and they took it anyway. When we left the restaurant, Grandpa didn't say much. He hugged me, hugged Liam, said goodnight to everyone like it had been any other family dinner. But before I got into the car, he touched my arm. "Meet me at the hotel tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "We need to talk." He didn't look angry. He looked like someone who had just watched the final piece of a puzzle slide into place. Something had changed. I just didn't know how much. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, or not just because of that, but because everything I thought I understood about my family had collapsed in the middle of a birthday dinner. I'd spent years convincing myself they were thoughtless, not malicious, flawed, but still family. And yet there I was, 26 years old, sitting in a hotel lobby the next morning, waiting to find out how far their selfishness really went. Grandpa came down a few minutes after 9, exactly on time. Button-down shirt, cargo pants, hiking boots, like he was ready to step into a canyon right after breakfast. He handed me a coffee without saying a word and gestured toward the street. We walked around the block, a quiet part of town with barely any traffic, the city noise reduced to a distant hum. 2 months ago, I sent $40,000 to your dad, he said finally. He told me it was for you, your idea. I told him not to make it a big deal, just to get it into your hands quietly. I didn't want it to feel like a handout. I stopped walking. He sent it through him, I repeated slowly. Not even a text to me, not one word. Suddenly, a lot of things made sense. Rachel flashing a new phone on her stories. Mom casually mentioning a spa weekend. Dad being especially smug one night at dinner while talking about liquidity. They took it. They didn't hesitate. They didn't tell me. They didn't even bother to invent a decent lie. Grandpa turned to face me and pulled a folded slip of paper from his pocket. I figured you'd say something by now, he said. When you didn't, I knew. It wasn't a receipt. It was a bank statement, a new account, my name on it, $15,000. That's yours, he said. I'm not asking questions. Build something with it. Burn it trying. I don't care what you do, only that you do it your way. My throat tightened. What are you going to do about the rest? About them? He didn't answer right away. He just looked past me, toward the hotel entrance, like he was seeing something I couldn't. You know, he said, your dad asked for that money with a straight face. Said you were too nervous to approach me, that you wanted him to manage it. I gave it to him because I thought maybe he was trying to repair something. He shook his head once. But now I see, he added quietly. I was giving him a chance he didn't earn. He started back toward the hotel. I wanted to see if you were different, he said over his shoulder. You are. That's all I needed. Then he walked inside, leaving me on the sidewalk with a coffee cooling in my hands and a number in my head that would change everything. I didn't go home that day, and I had no idea that the moment they decided to bury that money, they'd also buried whatever future they thought they had, not just with Grandpa, but with me. I checked into a downtown hotel that afternoon instead of driving back to my parents' house. It wasn't that far from their neighborhood, just a few train stops, but it felt like another country. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. The room was small, with a view of a brick wall and a slice of sky, but it was quiet. And most importantly, it was mine for the night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the bank statement in my hand, the number burning into my vision. $15,000. A miracle if it hadn't been born out of a betrayal. When I finally called Liam and told him everything, he didn't swear or explode the way I half expected. He just went very, very quiet. I'm coming over, he said. Text me the address. 20 minutes later, he was at the door with takeout and his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't make any jokes, didn't try to minimize it. He just sat across from me at the tiny hotel table, listening while I went through the conversation with Grandpa word for word. They took all 40? He asked eventually. They spent all 40, I corrected. On what? I can pretty much guess. He rubbed his jaw, thinking. And your mom, your dad, Rachel. Not one of them said anything. Not a single, oh, by the way, Grandpa did something nice for you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Why would they? That would mean I was supposed to get it. He reached across his table and covered my hand with his. Elena, this isn't just selfish. It's theft. The word sat between us like another person. Theft. I'd been dancing around that word all day, tiptoeing past it. But there it was. I didn't sleep much that night either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's cracked smile, my mom's blinking, Rachel's fork hitting the plate. I saw Grandpa's face when he said, I wanted to see if you were different. The next morning, my phone lit up with missed calls. Mom, 2 missed calls, 3 voicemails. Dad, 1 missed call, 4 long texts. Rachel, a single message. I didn't listen to any of it right away. I just watched the notifications stack up, one after another, like they could feel something trembling under their feet and were trying to pin it back down. Around noon, my phone rang again. Grandpa, I've taken care of my end, he said when I answered. His voice was calm, almost light. Let them figure out theirs. What does that mean? I asked. You'll see, he replied. Just focus on you now. Use what you've got. Build something. And stay where you are for a few days if you need to. You don't owe anyone an appearance. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. But while I sat there in that plain hotel room, he started pulling threads that had been holding my parents' world together for years. He shut everything off. Quietly, precisely, without any dramatic announcement. The first sign came from my mom. That evening, she called again and left a voicemail I finally listened to. "Elena, sweetheart, something strange happened with the gas card. They said it's been closed. I don't know why. I think there might be some kind of fraud. We're trying to sort it out. Call me when you get this, okay? Love you." Her voice was thin, high, almost shrill at the edges. The family gas card had always technically been in Grandpa's name. They used it every week without thinking. Groceries, errands, small emergencies that somehow never seemed small. Then the property taxes came due. Grandpa had been covering those in the background for over a decade. No bragging, no speeches, just quiet transfers that kept them from slipping under. He stopped those too. I heard about that one indirectly. My dad sent a long text 3 days later, written like he was calm, like he was the reasonable one, trying to hold a shaky situation together. "We need to talk and clear the air. There's a lot of confusion right now with your grandfather and the finances. It's important we don't make rash decisions or say things we can't take back." Not once did he deny taking the money. Rachel's message came in one line. "Really? You're turning him against us now?" No mention of 40,000, no apology. Just a convenient villain. Me. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat on that stiff hotel bed and opened my laptop. If Grandpa wanted me to build something, then fine. I'd start. With the 15,000 he'd quietly set aside for me, I did what I'd been dreaming of doing for years. Without their input, without their approval. I priced out what I actually needed for the logistics platform. Not flashy things, not the kind of purchases you post about. I bought web hosting, back-end tools, licensing, basic branding, a decent laptop upgrade that didn't feel like it was going to catch fire every time I ran analytics. I made a list, crossed things off, added more. My heart still hurt, but my hands were steady. Liam sat beside me, working through some of his own emails, but every so often he'd glance over and ask, "Do you need a second opinion?" Or, "Want me to look over that vendor?" Never pushing, never taking over. After 2 nights at the hotel, he finally said, "Move in with me for a while. Just until you figure out your next step. I know this room feels like limbo." I hesitated. I don't want to be a burden. He gave me a look that made the argument die in my throat. "You're not a burden. You're my partner. You're allowed to land somewhere safe while you rebuild." So I packed my bag, folded the bank statement into my wallet, and left the key on the dresser. I didn't go anywhere near my parents' house. I couldn't bring myself to walk past the kitchen they remodeled with money that was supposed to be my future. I refused to sit on the couch where they had once lectured me about being financially responsible. Liam's apartment wasn't big, but it was bright. Sunlight came in through wide windows in the morning, hitting the kitchen counter where he'd lined up mismatched mugs over the years. There was a plant dying in the corner that he kept forgetting to water, and a stack of shoes by the door that never seemed to stay organized. For the first time in a long time, I exhaled and felt like it reached all the way to the bottom of my lungs. Meanwhile, the unraveling back home continued. My mom called again, but this time her tone had shifted, less confused, more desperate. "Elena, honey, there's been some kind of misunderstanding with your grandfather. He's cut off several accounts, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. We know the money situation got a little confusing, but it was never meant to hurt you. We just needed to take care of some things while you figured out what direction you wanted to go." Some things, while you figured out your direction. They had turned my stolen future into a story about their sacrifice. My dad sent another text. "We should meet. Talk face to face. This is turning into something it doesn't need to be. Remember, family comes first." I stared at those words for a long time. Family comes first. Did it. Because from where I stood, family only seemed to come first when they were taking from me, not when they were supposed to protect me. Rachel switched from private messages to public performance. She started posting vague quotes on her stories about people who let money ruin blood and forget who was there when they had nothing. Liam showed me one of the posts while we sat together on the couch. "Do you want me to say something?" he asked. I shook my head. "She wants a reaction. That's all this is. I'm not giving her one." In the middle of all that noise, one thing stayed steady. Grandpa. We started meeting once a week. Not formally, not like business appointments, just lunch at a small cafe or a walk through the park or coffee on a bench near the river. He asked about everything. Not just, how's the business, but what's your biggest challenge right now? And what kind of clients do you actually want to work with? He didn't hover. He didn't tell me what to do unless I asked. He just listened. And when he did speak, every word landed. Money doesn't make people worse, he told me one afternoon, watching ducks fight over crumbs by the water. It just shows you who they already are. That line sank deep, especially when I found out my dad had started calling people, extended family, old colleagues, even one of my former mentors from college. He wasn't asking how I was. He was asking if anyone knew how much Grandpa had gifted me, whether I was getting in over my head making risky moves, what kind of operation I was running. One of my old internship supervisors called me out of the blue. Your dad's sniffing around, he said, playing the concerned father card. Thought you should know. Concerned father. He hadn't been concerned when he pocketed $40,000 meant for me, but now that he'd lost access to Grandpa's pipeline and couldn't see what I was building without him, suddenly he cared. That's when I understood something that made my stomach tighten. They weren't just angry that I'd gotten something. They were afraid I might actually succeed without them. Afraid that if I built something on my own with Grandpa's blessing, their grip on me would be gone for good. They were right to be afraid. I kept working. Liam and I found a slightly bigger place near the edge of the city, a small apartment we could afford if we stretched, and I landed a few solid clients. He covered the first deposit without making it a grand gesture. I know you'll pay me back, he said simply. That's not why I'm doing it. The launch of my platform was small, quiet. No dramatic announcements, no ribbon cutting. Just a website going live, a few early clients who gave me a chance, and one surprising lead that looked like it might turn into something long-term. Grandpa didn't interfere. He just checked in, asked for updates, reminded me to sleep. Back on my parents' side of town, the tension was turning into something else, something tighter. And as the distance between us widened, one thing became clear. They hadn't just stolen $40,000. They'd stolen trust. And now that it was gone, they were scrambling to figure out who they were without it. 2 weeks passed before anyone from my family tried something more direct. Until then, they hovered, circling, waiting, regrouping. I knew the silence wouldn't last. People like them don't surrender. They calculate. They wait for the angle that makes them look innocent again. It ended up being my mom who made the first real move. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our new apartment, debugging a messy part of the site's back end while Liam made coffee. Sunlight was pooling across the laminate floors, warming the room in a way the hotel never managed to do. Then there was a knock. Liam went quiet. Are you expecting anyone? I shook my head. When he opened the door, I heard her voice immediately. Hi, sweetheart. My whole body went cold. My mom was standing there in the hallway holding a Tupperware container like it was some kind of peace offering, like a little plastic box of lasagna could erase everything she had done. Liam stepped aside reluctantly. She's here with food, he said quietly, as if warning me. I didn't invite her in. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. She smiled the way she always did when she wanted something. Soft, maternal, rehearsed. I thought I'd bring you something to eat. I know you've been busy. Busy trying to rebuild a life I didn't break. Busy trying to feel like I wasn't drowning in betrayal. But she didn't mean it like that. She meant busy being dramatic, busy avoiding us, busy making things unnecessarily difficult. I didn't take the food. I just said, "Why are you here?" She blinked, shifting into her nostalgic script. Well, I've been thinking a lot about you. You haven't been home, and I miss you. I wanted to see how work is going. I heard you're doing something exciting. She said it like she was proud, like she hadn't stolen the money meant for that very exciting thing. I let her talk. I let her fill the hallway with warm, meaningless words designed to soften me before the blade came out. And then it came. The shift. I saw it happen in her eyes. Elena, things have been tight lately. Your grandfather made some sudden decisions, and we're trying to understand why. We're behind on a few things. Rachel had to cancel a trip she's been planning for months. Your father is stressed. We're all shocked by how sudden his choices were. There it was, the reason she'd shown up. Not concern, not love, need. She continued, carefully crafting her narrative. We know the money situation got a little confusing, but we only ever used it to help the family, to take care of things while you figured out what direction you wanted to go. I felt something twist inside me, not anger, clarity. They didn't think they stole it. They thought they were entitled to it. They thought my future was optional. Their comfort wasn't. They had rewritten the story in their heads until they were the heroes of it. So I asked one question, the only question that mattered. Did you ever plan to tell me? She hesitated, just half a second, but it was enough. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. We didn't want to overwhelm you. You've always had a sensitive side. Sensitive. That word hit like a slap. Sensitive meant weak. Sensitive meant incapable. Sensitive meant you're not someone who can handle responsibility, so we handled it for you. She set the Tupperware on the floor gently, like she was leaving an offering at a shrine, and then she went in for the kill. Elena, if you just talk to him, if you explain, maybe we can get back to normal. Normal. Normal was them stealing opportunities and calling it love. Normal was them using my life like it was a shared account. Normal was me being quiet so they didn't have to face who they were. I didn't say a word. I just opened the door behind me and stepped back inside. She called my name once, a little too sharp, then left. The next day, Rachel tried her angle. She didn't message me. She messaged Liam. Her text lit up his phone during breakfast. She's changing. You're letting her make rash decisions. You've turned her against us. Liam handed me the phone without saying a word. All I did was laugh. Tired, raw. Block her, I said. He did immediately. 2 hours later, my dad called from an unknown number. I answered out of curiosity. He sounded calm, unnervingly calm, the way he always sounded before he twisted something into his advantage. Elena, we need to talk. This money situation has gotten blown out of proportion. I did what any father would do. I managed it. I made decisions. I protected the family's future. By stealing from me? I asked. He ignored the question. He always ignored the questions that mattered. You wouldn't have understood, he continued. This kind of responsibility, it's something you learn when people depend on you. You're smart, but you're young, emotional. You don't see the big picture yet. There it was, the family mantra. You don't understand. You're too sensitive. We know better. Then he added a line that chilled me more than anything else he'd said so far. You're going to be successful, Elena. Don't let this stupid money ruin your future. Don't alienate your family over a temporary misunderstanding. A temporary misunderstanding. $40,000 stolen. A lifetime of minimized boundaries. And now he wanted to call it temporary. He ended the call with one final warning. Don't make us your enemies. I stared at the black screen after the call ended. Not shaking, not crying, just still. And then finally, I said the words I had never let myself say out loud before. They already made that choice. Because they had. When they stole from me. When they lied to me. When they belittled me. When they expected me to swallow it all and call it love. The more they tried to pull me back in, the clearer it became. They were losing control. The visits, the texts, the sudden nostalgia, the fake concern. None of it was about reconciliation. It was about reestablishing the hierarchy, about putting me back in my place, the daughter who stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed grateful. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't that daughter anymore. I wasn't their lifeline, their excuse, their pawn. I was done giving them anything. Silence, obedience, explanations, access, all of it. I ignored the calls. I deleted the messages. I stopped checking Rachel's social media jabs. Liam asked if I wanted him to step in at any point. I told him no. This wasn't about winning. It was about walking away from people who had already shown me what they were willing to break. And meanwhile, Grandpa stayed steady. His presence calm, grounding. He didn't push for updates. He didn't tell me how I should feel. He just listened. And when he spoke, it was always something that hit exactly where it needed to. People reveal themselves when money is involved. People reveal themselves when consequences arrive. People reveal themselves when they lose access to the version of you they depended on. And my family, my parents, my sister, they had revealed everything. What I didn't know yet was that Grandpa had seen enough too, and he was about to make a decision none of them could ever undo. 3 weeks after the birthday dinner, my life had split cleanly down the middle, before the truth, and after it. On one side was everything I used to accept. The compromises, the careful tone I took around my parents, the mental gymnastics I did to turn their mistreatment into misunderstandings. On the other side was the quiet, unfamiliar world I was building now with Liam. Our small apartment. My little business finally taking shape. Morning coffee without drama. Silence that didn't hurt. But while my world was becoming clearer, theirs was beginning to crack. It started subtly. A former colleague of my dad's, someone I'd interned for years ago, called me unexpectedly. He used a low voice, the kind people use when they aren't sure whether they should say something. "Your father's been asking around," he said. "Wants to know if you've mentioned anything big, a new financial push, a business plan, an investment." In other words, he was fishing. He wanted to know if Grandpa had given me more money. He wanted to know how much control he'd lost. "He's worried you're getting in over your head," the colleague added carefully. But my dad wasn't worried about me. He was worried about losing the oversight he'd always had, the oversight he thought he deserved. He was worried the last connection to Grandpa's resources had shifted away from him. He was worried that I might succeed without him. And he was right to worry, because the more distance I put between us, the easier everything became. My work started flowing. Clients trickled in. 2 local vendors, 1 mid-sized company, and 1 surprising contract that could turn into a long-term partnership. Liam and I fell into a rhythm. He worked early mornings, I worked late into the night, and somehow our schedules wove around each other without friction. He didn't hover, he didn't push, he didn't treat my ambitions like a hobby. He treated them like they mattered, like I mattered. But the quieter my life became, the louder things got back in my parents' house. Rachel's Instagram became a mess of vague, emotional quotes about betrayal, loyalty, snakes in the grass. Classic. Rachel, indirect, dramatic, and never once acknowledging what she'd done. My mom's messages turned increasingly frantic. She went from sad to anxious to borderline manipulative within days. "Your grandfather is confused. We've always been there for you. We're your family. We need to talk." And then the one that made Liam physically tense as he read it over my shoulder. "You can't abandon us over money." Money. The thing they stole from me. The thing they treated like spare change. The thing they used to live their pretty little lives without thinking twice. But they didn't call it theft. They called it a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Grandpa and I met once a week. Not about the money. He rarely mentioned it. He was more interested in how the platform functioned, what problems I was solving, whether I needed more server space. He didn't see me as fragile. He didn't see me as a child. He saw me as someone capable, someone he chose to invest in because he believed in me. Then, one Saturday morning, everything shifted. Liam came back into the living room holding his phone with a strange look on his face. He handed it to me without speaking. "Rachel, 3:17 a.m. I know where you live." The timestamp did something to me. 3 in the morning. Desperate, unhinged, calculated in a way only she was capable of. It wasn't a legal threat. It wasn't even specific. But it didn't have to be. It was a warning, a final attempt at control. Liam watched my face. "Do you want to block her?" I didn't answer at first. I just stared at the message, stared at the tiny black letters forming the last card she thought she had. Then I took a screenshot, opened a new message, and sent the screenshot, with no caption, to Grandpa. Less than 5 minutes later, he called. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded resolved. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this," he said quietly, "but it has." I felt a chill ripple through me. "What are you going to do?" He paused, then asked me only one thing. "Elena, do you trust me to handle it?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes." "Then let me take care of it," he said. "And stay away from them for now. All of them." The call ended, and whatever he'd been holding back, whatever line he'd been unwilling to cross, I knew he was stepping over it now. Not out of revenge, out of clarity, out of protection, out of a sense of responsibility to someone who hadn't betrayed him. 3 days passed. Then, on a warm mid-morning, it happened. My parents and Rachel showed up uninvited at Grandpa's house, not for an apology, not for the truth, for an act. My mom was already crying before she stepped out of the car. My dad carried a binder, probably full of sloppy financial plans he'd thrown together the night before. Rachel stayed by the driveway, pretending she wasn't involved while texting someone. I didn't need to guess who. Grandpa told me the story later, but I could picture it perfectly. Every detail. My family storming his porch with polished lies, hoping to smooth talk their way back into his wallet, expecting him to cave the moment tears were shed. But he didn't budge. He let them talk, let them plead, let them spin their version of events. And then, calmly, too calmly, he laid everything out. He told them he was done funding their lifestyle, done cleaning up their messes, done being manipulated. He told them he was updating everything. The trust, the accounts, the property, the fallback cash, the investments, the will, all of it. They were no longer beneficiaries. They were no longer the safety net he'd been quietly maintaining for years. And then he delivered the final blow. He told them he had chosen a new heir. Not out of anger, not out of spite, not as punishment, but as a correction, as a realignment, as an acknowledgement of who had shown loyalty and who hadn't. Those were his exact words to me later. A correction. He didn't name me to them, not directly. He didn't need to. They knew. They knew exactly who he meant. And that knowledge hurt them far more than any amount of money ever could. Rachel cried. My mom sobbed. My dad tried to argue. None of it worked. Grandpa stood his ground, not in anger, but in absolute, unshakable certainty. And when they finally left, he locked the gate behind them. The story wasn't over yet, but the power had officially shifted forever. A week after that confrontation, the one I hadn't witnessed, but could visualize as clearly as if I'd been standing on Grandpa's porch, he showed up at our apartment with a paper bag full of bagels. No warning, no tension, just a knock, then his familiar voice through the door. It's me, I brought breakfast. Liam opened it first, smiled, and stepped aside. Grandpa walked in like he always belonged there, like this bright, it's small apartment with mismatched chairs and a dying plant in the corner was as natural for him as his home in Arizona. He sat at the table, unscrewed the lid on his coffee thermos, and watched as I plated the bagels. Liam moved around the kitchen quietly, giving us space without leaving the room. Grandpa took a bite, chewed slowly, then said, just as casually as if he were commenting on the weather, I told them. My hand froze on the butter knife. Told them what? He sipped his coffee. That I was done. That the will was updated. That the accounts and properties were already reassigned. Everything is finalized. Not pending. Finalized. I stared. The words hit harder than I expected, even though I knew something big was coming. You did all of it? I whispered. All of it, he confirmed. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because they gambled with your future. They gambled with my trust. And I don't reward people who treat either one like a disposable resource. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Gratitude, shock, grief, all of it tangled together. He continued, voice steady, eyes sharp. They'll be fine. They always land on their feet. People like them find someone else to latch onto. He said it with such certainty that it almost made me laugh. Almost. But what was meant for them? The fallback money, the safety nets, the properties, the accounts, the things I kept in place out of habit. That's gone. I'm not transferring them to you, he added quickly. I don't want to drown you. I'm redirecting most of my estate to causes that matter. Housing programs, scholarships, environmental projects. But what I did do was remove the safety cushions they've abused. I swallowed hard. So what happens now? He shrugged lightly. Now, you live your life. You build your future, and you leave them to build theirs. It should have felt triumphant, a victory. But the truth was more complicated. Because the moment he removed their safety nets, he also removed their excuses, their chance to ever pretend they didn't know what they lost. They did know, and they handled it exactly how I expected. My mom sent an email first, 4 paragraphs of flowery warmth. We've always loved you. Families go through hard times. You know how emotional your grandfather can be. Let's all sit down and fix this. You're breaking our hearts by ignoring us. Not once did she address the theft. Not once did she mention the word money. It was all feelings, none of them real. Then my dad left a voicemail, 5 seconds of silence, then a half breath like he was about to speak, and then he hung up. He didn't try again. Rachel, unsurprisingly, went straight for social media. Her Instagram stories turned into a dramatic parade of vague accusations. Some people forget who raised them. Money shows true colors. Greedy people always get what's coming. None of them said my name, but they didn't need to. Their followers weren't the audience. I was. But I didn't engage, not once. Because something inside me had shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't begging for their love. I wasn't trying to salvage a bond that never really existed. Meanwhile, my business, the tiny seed I planted with Grandpa's $15,000, was growing. Fast. The regional vendor I'd pitched to signed a short-term contract that covered our expenses for 4 months. A few of my early clients recommended me to others. Within weeks, I had enough work that I hired my first contractor, a detail that felt surreal and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I checked every invoice twice, triple-checked every service agreement, and slept less than I should have. But the work didn't feel draining. It felt like momentum, like the world was finally tilting in the right direction. Liam was steady as ever. He picked up dinner when he knew I'd forget to eat. He blocked off the kitchen counter so I'd stop spreading documents everywhere. He reminded me, gently, always gently, that I was allowed to rest. He never once said, "I told you so," but I could see it in his eyes. He'd seen this version of me long before I did. And Grandpa? He didn't hover. He didn't micromanage. He didn't hold the decision over my head. He visited twice a month, sometimes with bagels, sometimes with old books from his garage, sometimes with articles he'd printed out about early logistics companies. He asked about my team, about my product roadmap, about whether I was eating enough. He never brought up my parents. I think, like me, he'd stopped giving them space in his thoughts. And the strangest part, I didn't feel angry anymore. Just free, clear. Every day I built something, a small system, a new client pipeline, a marketing test. I stepped further away from the version of myself who used to tiptoe around a family that never cared what they broke. That version of me was gone. And the door that slammed shut 2 months ago, I hadn't looked back at it once, because the life that opened on the other side, quiet, honest, earned, was finally mine.